Hey everyone, my name is Kristin Eaves. I am the board president of Carson Accountability and Transparency, aka CAT. We have Assembly Member Lowenthal with us today. And I want to just say a little bit more about CAT. We are a nonprofit organization that promotes effective, honest, accountable local government practices. We are here for the city of Carson residents, and we are excited to be able to share just what's happening in the city in ways that we can help you all make informed decisions about your local government. So we have Assembly Member Lowenthal. Thank you so much for joining us. So
Appreciate
we're
you,
going to
Kristin.
get,
Yeah, thank
yes,
you. Thank you for this opportunity.
absolutely. We are going to get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm born and raised in this area. Grew up going to local schools in Long Beach, actually on Signal Hill. Spent time in Mexico for a bit and became a fluent Spanish speaker growing up, which has served me well. I'm a small business owner in town. I had a career in the telecommunications sector, but I now own some small businesses local in the community, and I'm a dad. I'm a single dad of 3 girls who also go to public schools, and very proud of that foremost than anything else.
Awesome. So you oversee Assembly District 69. Tell me what cities are a part of that district?
Carson is part of that district. Long Beach is a part of that district. Signal Hill and Avalon, Catalina Island, is part of the district. Roughly
Okay.
500,000 people total,
Yep.
give or take, and in 4 cities that are very distinct from each other.
Very much so. So going back to you a bit. So I know your mother, she served in the assembly, and your father was in the House, I believe. Give me a little bit of background as to your primary reason for running. Obviously, maybe they had something to do with it.
Well, I think it would be natural to ask that question, but my parents were activists like you, Kristin, in the community. And when I was a kid growing up, I would come back to the living room of my house, and there'd be a meeting going on about things that are going on in the community. My brother and my brother is also a public servant. He's a Superior Court judge, criminal courts in Long Beach, as a matter of fact, and he's trying some of the most difficult and heinous crimes that you can imagine. And we were taught at a young age that we have an obligation to be involved in our community and be part of the change that we want to see in this world. My parents weren't elected officials then. They were activists. They were teachers. My dad taught psychology for 25 years at Cal State Long Beach. My mom also taught psychology at Long Beach City College. And that's what I'm familiar with. And, being active for me was something that was firsthand growing up. In college, I ran for student government and got involved, became the student body president at Cornell University in New York prior to my parents ever running for office. So, it's been, activism has been something in the family for some time. And they ultimately didn't run until I was an adult. So they're very, proud of both my brother and I, and there certainly isn't any pressure whatsoever to be involved. This is just a natural graduation from activism.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing that. So, can you describe your role as assembly member? What's a typical day like for you?
Yeah. Listen, the job is to represent these 4 amazing cities in Sacramento, in the state capital. So an average day, it depends. A day like today, where I'm home in the district, I get to have meetings or connect with the community like this versus a day in Sacramento. where we're working through legislation, either the bills that we're working on or on the committees that I'm sitting on. There's literally 2,000 pieces of legislation that we, have to make decisions on through the course of the year. And we're also administering, an over $300 billion budget for the state of California, which is now the fourth largest economy on the planet. And you're talking about becoming a subject matter expert in a breadth of issues ranging from public education, housing, to environmental protection, how to grow business, how to support cities and local economies, and so forth. So any given day can be meeting on those topics. It can be sitting in committee. It can be working on bills. It can be meeting with elected officials like the mayor and council members in Carson, meeting with community groups and neighborhood associations such as yours, Kristin. And, in every scenario, I try and learn from whomever I'm talking to and empathize with whomever I'm talking to. And that, to me is the great gift of this position, is the ability to try to see through one's lens and improve their quality of life any which way I can.
Lovely. So, in addition to writing legislation and sitting on these committees and making recommendations, can you tell folks what are other services that the Assembly office provides?
Well, think about any type of service that has to do with the state of California, state agencies. So that can be, public education. It can be EDD and the DMV. It can be CalFresh or other state programs. So my office provides sort of a gateway to any of those services and assistance with the public that needs to have those services. We're also here to voice opinion on a bill. May not be legislation that I write, but it can be on any topic. California is a very bold state. We're not afraid to take on challenges here in California. And it's a participatory democracy. We rely upon the voices of the people that we represent, to guide us, to steer us, in terms of how we vote on these matters. And so, connection with the community on any of these things is critically important. And finally, we can mark special occasions by providing certificates of appreciation or recognition, memorial resolutions for friends and family, community members that have passed, and so forth. So there's a whole gamut of services that we provide.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So before the new district boundaries took effect last year, the city of Carson was represented by one assembly district, and now we've been split into two. From your experience or knowledge and understanding, is there a benefit to being split into two assembly districts, or is it a disadvantage for us? Do you have any insight?
I think it's a huge advantage. One
Okay.
person, because when Carson comes up inside the Capitol for any reason, you have two assembly members who are ready and willing to go to bat for this community and eager to do so. I work extremely well with Assemblymember Gibson. He and I are very close. As a matter of fact, we had both been on the leadership team together of Assembly Speaker Rendon, and we collaborate. Tomorrow, I'll be attending his select committee. He's the chair of the select committee on ports and goods movement. And I will be attending his select committee meeting at the Port of Los Angeles and eager to do so. So, to answer your question, I absolutely think two is better than one. Long Beach is also represented by both Assemblymember Gibson and myself. So we don't just collaborate on Carson, we collaborate on Long Beach as well. And it's nice to have a fresh perspective. I come with a lot of energy as it relates to this community. And so I really, appreciate this opportunity. And, you have now two voices that will be here for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think Carson is a special space, and there's so much opportunity for us to grow economically and continue to develop the cultures that are in Carson. And so I'm excited to hear that you are bringing the energy at the Capitol. Thank you.
Carson is amazing.
Uh,
I mean, Carson
yeah.
Carson is California. Carson, I spent a lot of time when I was running for this office walking in Carson
Uh-huh.
and knocking on doors. And I've never heard of a community where, one house is white, one house is Filipino, one house African American, Latino, Samoan. You go down and there's unbelievable harmony, not just harmony, but neighbors who are proud of each other, truly
Yeah.
proud of you know that is the beauty of this community is the flavor of the people, and I haven't seen it anywhere else, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. So it's tremendous, with tremendous pride, that I have the opportunity to represent this community.
I like that adjective, flavor, the flavor of the community. That feels good. And yeah, there is a lot of harmony. Thank you. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about you and your family. You are kind of synonymous with the city of Long Beach. And you've kind of answered it, but maybe it's like, how has your office worked to ensure that residents in the city of Carson are getting the fair representation? Like I said, you touched on it, but is there anything that's come up legislatively that you kind of gave your 2 cents to make it better for Carson?
100%. I'm squarely focused on all four of the cities that I represent, and they have
Okay.
distinct issues. It Carson has an amazing, rich history, and the impacts of the goods movement sector, like in Long Beach, disproportionately affect the residents there. People in Carson, when I walk, all want to talk about air quality. They want to talk
Yeah.
about the news channel, but they also want to talk about the impacts of goods movement. They want to talk about the impacts of marathon, and they want to know what we are doing. A lot of them spoke about COVID and, feeling like COVID disproportionately impacted anybody that's on the goods movement corridor because of higher rates of asthma and other lung, disease issues. And so, we are looking at that, and we are steadfast in making sure that we're protecting the residents in any which way that we can. It's on me to deliver for the people of Carson. And that's what I'm doing. I secured $2 million in the budget last year for road improvements to get ready for the Olympics. My staff is and I are building relationships with the community. And, I'm sure this is going to air ultimately, but I want to invite the residents of Carson to come on a tour that I'm giving, a harbor tour around the Port of Long Beach. So I want to connect with the residents in any opportunity that I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So you just closed out your first legislative session. Can you give us more about how that experience was for you? And was it anything that you expected?
I don't think anything could have gotten me ready for that. It was, totally and completely surreal. It's such an
Okay.
honor to serve in the assembly. Um, I was named to leadership as the assistant majority whip, which means that leadership is leaning on me to, make sure that legislation has the requisite votes to get across the finish line, and that includes everything from water, changes in energy, um, environmental protection, housing and homelessness, and all the things that we're taking on here in the state of California. Constantly meeting new people. Um, it's a bit of a whirlwind. It's kind of drinking out of a fire hose, but I'm loving every second of it, and very proud of the legislation that we brought forward. Also, Kristin.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. Can you tell me about some of the legislation you have authored and that is successfully passed this year?
Yeah, so coming out of the gate, being elected in November and then starting in January, didn't have a long period of time to be working on bills. the way that I will for this year and years forward. So a lot of the legislation came from my experience as a dad. And I'm a father of 3 girls. And I have deep concerns, like so many in the district, about the world our children are growing up into. Um, I have a bill, AB 10, about body shaming and making sure that all school districts have policies and curricula around body shaming. We see that girls have a 65% higher rate of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicide than they did 10 years ago. And that has to do with social media. You
Right.
know, the kids of today are growing up with much different pressures than you and I had when we were growing up, Kristen. Uh,
Yeah.
for example, when you and I came home after school, we were done with school. We were done with those social pressures. But because of social media these days, it doesn't end even when they get home. And so, we need to make sure that our schools are equipped with the tools to make sure that our kids' mental health is in a place where they can focus on school and they can achieve. So, that experience came from, things I've dealt with as a father. Also have AB 1013, which is about drink spiking. You may have heard of roofing. Have you ever heard of being roofied? Well, we have
Hmm.
a crisis in this state where women and LGBTQ plus community, but mostly women, are being targeted for sexual assault. Their drinks are being spiked. It's an epidemic that's happening statewide, and we haven't been doing anything about it. So this bill makes sure that if you're going out to a bar, you're going out to a club, you can ask and receive either a coaster or a test strip and test your drink and make sure that it hasn't been roofied with GHB or ketamine. And just the presence of those alone, we believe, out in the public eye, is going to prevent that from happening. And that crisis, I think, is a lot like drunk driving. Drunk driving, you have to prevent it. If you get to a place where the offense is taking place, it's too late. So we've got to do more to make sure that women and the LGBTQ plus communities feel safe going out, and young people feel safe going out. Also very proud of AB 907, which is about the PANS and PANDAS, which is an autoimmune disease that many families in our communities, by the way, Carson, Long Beach, Signal Hill, all have families whose children are suffering from this autoimmune disease, that insurance companies are required to pick up coverage for that. And prior to this, they haven't been. These bills, along with a gun safety bill, a housing bill, and others, very proud to say, made it through the legislature. Awaiting the governor's signature.
Mm. Awesome work. And I know writing these bills and getting them passed through different committees can be a long process, but the intent is there. For me, I always think about, okay, the bill is written, but we have to understand that not many people are aware of legislation, right? So it's been passed. However, now how do we get people who are going out to know about these things, knowing that, hey, they can ask the bar trip. That guy over there seemed a bit strange, and I'm not sure what he was doing when he was over here. Can I have one of those strips to test to see? So I would love to see more advertising around these incredible bills and legislation, so we can really make the most out of all the work that you're doing.
I agree with you.
Because it's
And sometimes the state needs to participate in public awareness campaigns
yeah,
and the budgetary asks, right, and budget requests. And also sometimes, Kristen, you need momentum. You need to start chiseling away at a problem year by year, right? So this roofing crisis, which is a
yeah,
real crisis. If you talk to women in their 20s that are going out, they have a bullseye on their back when they're going out. It is.
yeah.
By the way, if it was happening to men, we'd have a holy war going on right now. The fact that it's happening to women, we've tolerated. And that it has to end. But in future years, we'll keep working at that problem until we make sure that we're we're changing it. It's
Yeah.
not enough to have a bill that passes, that the governor signs, where there's no change in the issues. So, um, I think in the next year we're going to be looking at, well, what happens when somebody is out at a bar and they feel like they've been drugged, and they say to the bar, "Hey, I believe that I've been drugged." You know, I believe that it's incumbent upon the bar, the restaurant, to call law enforcement and make sure that that person is safe.
Hmm.
And by the way, I'm a bar and restaurant owner, so I'm not
Hmm.
trying to make this, to be difficult for the folks there under any circumstance. But everybody wants a safe environment, so we're going to keep
Absolutely.
at it until we're actually making a difference. And as it relates to the body shaming issue, I'm laser focused on social media and mental health. As a matter of fact, I have a bill that became a what's called a 2-year bill. So we
Right.
didn't get it through in the legislative session, but it carries over into the next. And that is to create a state commission on social media and mental health. And so we have a plan, and we, figure out what we're measuring, and how we're looking at these things. It's wild. Different states are doing different things. The state of Utah has made it illegal for minors to be on social media after 10 p.m.
Okay.
Other states are doing other things, and the federal government is looking at how to do this. By the way, if you go to China and you try and go
Hmm.
on certain applications, they have very robust
Absolutely.
verification platforms. And if you go on TikTok in China, for example, you don't get young people don't get ads about diet pills or how the
Right.
body needs to be perfect. They get ads on how to become an astronaut and
Yeah.
STEM research, and thinking about their future. And I think we need to figure out how we're enhancing and building on young people's lives, and not
Hmm.
putting them in a place of potential great peril, especially for their mental health.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. While I'm not a parent at this time in my life, I do recognize the difficulties that young kids are going through. And, I am imploring the parents as well. Just we got to set those boundaries. I'll share with you. I watched this incredible docu series called Abstract, and Ian Spalter. He is a designer, and he is responsible for the um, Instagram logo. So the second version of it, and it was interesting to me that his children, they actually don't use phones. So I think one of his eldest must have been like 10 or 11, and he didn't even use a phone. And yet his father is responsible for one of the most well-known social media designs, of the time. And so that to me that spoke volumes. Um, and so again, just ensuring that we as parents are putting some parameters in addition to all the work the state is doing and the federal government is doing to also create those parameters.
Yeah, Steve,
Um,
Steve Jobs, or Jobs, depending on how you pronounce his name, the late founder and CEO of Apple, would not let his own children utilize
mhm.
iPads. So that tells you a
Yeah,
lot right there.
absolutely. I did some research at SC around the digital divide and recognizing, we talk about the uh, lack of access of internet. And the research I did talked about how we are actually using it, right? And that becomes the real divide where you have certain people interacting with the internet or just technology from a space where they're creating videos at young ages, right? And then other children, and a lot of time this has to do with income disparity and just economic class. They'll be more inclined to use it for social media. We don't have the China ads to be encouraged to be an astronaut. So there's so many things. So I appreciate the work you're doing.
By the way, everything online is not evil, right? And the digital divide is real, and we need to make sure that all communities have access to broadband in a way that's meaningful and provides opportunities. And that includes Carson, foremost. By the way, uh, you may find this interesting. One of the four cities that I represent is Avalon, Catalina. We think of Catalina as being, largely made up of extremely wealthy, white yacht owners. But the majority, actually 60% of the residents there are the Latino workers that make up the tourist economy. 100% of that economy is tourism. And they don't have broadband internet in Catalina at all. They only have what's called a microwave transmission, so that goes over the air. They don't have fiber going at all. And those students, those Latino students that I was just speaking of, during their AP exams last year, they couldn't even take them at high school. They had to go over to City Hall because there wasn't enough internet to take their AP exams.
Wow.
So definitely have our set of challenges in the 69th Assembly District.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you touched on that because I was looking at some of the Assembly District stats, and I recognized there's a very large Latino population. And you're telling me now that 60% of the Avalon community is in fact Latino. And so that gives me that information I need. Because I was like, oh, the population's so large, and it seems like a lot of that comes from the Avalon, the city of Avalon. So good to know. Good enough.
Well, there's actually that's not totally true. There's only 5,000 residents that live in the city of Avalon, so very different.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's 6% of that population.
Okay.
I love this district. It is truly diverse. 35% Latino, 35% white, 15% African American, 15% Asian American API. That Asian American, communities, we have a very large Filipino community, including in Carson and in West Long Beach. And I am so proud of that community. We don't talk about enough what heroes they are. I get emotional when I think about it. These community members went to work during COVID, worked double time, triple time, not the glamorous jobs, sometimes the nurse's assistant jobs, while bodies were literally piling up without having proper protection. They got COVID. They took COVID home to their houses and gave it to their families. They didn't complain. As you may remember, during that time, hospitals were not open to the general public, even to family members. Many of them were the last people that victims of COVID saw before they passed away. Unbelievable pressure that they were under. And, they stepped up in a way that should make us all proud. And so I'm proud of, certainly the Latino, the African American, the white, anybody, who served in that capacity, or anybody who worked in goods movement down at the ports, who did the very, very same things, by the way, to keep our economy going, the entire American economy going. If we had shut down our ports during that period of time, people risked themselves, to do that. But I say that specifically about the Filipino American community because, they overwhelmingly, make up a lot of those jobs in healthcare, and I'm just really proud of of them, and to be able to represent them in the legislature is a true gift.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. The diversity is extremely important in this world. So yes, thank you. So we've kind of covered the bills that you've authored and how work's been going during your first year. Now, I read that you are a part of a few committees: appropriations, business and professions, privacy and consumer protection, rules, transportation committee. So, the city of Carson just adopted its first economic development strategic plan. We have some ideas about changing our commercial and retail and office development. We're looking in ways to increase our tourism and entertainment, also the arts. And I know you may be on a committee for the arts as well. So tell me, now that this plan has been revealed, is there any way you can see yourself being able to help us drive this plan and really see some action out in Carson?
That's my job, Kristen, is to
Hmm.
do just that. So, what we need to do now is we need to put our heads together and prioritize. What we're really talking about are budget asks for the state of California in that $300 billion, annual budget. It used to be, by the way, up until just this past year, that we had a budget surplus.
Yeah,
Past year we had a deficit. So, it's time really for a bit of a haggle, right? You have many assembly members and senators representing the various districts, and it's up to us to really, bring it home for Carson. That, by the way, going back to working with Mike Gibson, is why two is better than one, because you
yeah,
got two members of the legislature fighting for, these priorities. So, you know, I'm very pleased to have started to build incredible relationships with members of the council, and the mayor in the great city of Carson, as well as neighborhood groups. And so I need to hear and listen and understand what the priorities should be, and go in and fight for those. And we're going to bring it home. That's what we're going to do.
awesome, lovely. And this is for my own interest. Could you tell me a bit more about the offshore wind energy standing committee you're a part of?
Well, actually, a few things in terms of energy. Offshore wind presents an incredible opportunity for this community because
Okay.
the port complex stands to be, the launching pad for these offshore windmills that will probably be located off of the central coast of California, but there is no port that can handle, these offshore windmills. We're talking about the size of the Eiffel Tower. These are not sort of small little, wind turbines. And, for me, why is this important? Well, renewable energy, of course, is important. It should be for all of us, right? All the
Yeah.
things we talked about with COVID and lung disease and the reason why we need to get to renewable energy, yes. But also because Carson and Long Beach and Signal Hill have oil economies.
Yes.
These jobs, and we're talking about good paying jobs, right? And union jobs, rely upon the fossil fuel industry. And California, as a whole, as a state, has a plan to move away from that over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. What is that going to do to jobs in this community? When you take jobs away from those sectors, what does that do to the mom and pop shops, to the restaurants, to the local economic development, to all the things that you're talking about in Carson's plan of building out? We need good jobs in the community where people have disposable income to spend on those things. So very excited,
Right.
you know, what offshore wind brings to this community in terms of jobs. We think it's going to be massive. So it's important to have a voice on that community, so we can advocate for why this needs to be the launching ground for those turbines.
Absolutely. Residents, you guys hear it first. Tell your children, your grandsons, even your granddaughters to get into to wind energy and also other renewable energy resources. Very important stuff. So we interviewed your colleague, Mike Gibson, a few years ago. He was actually our first guest on the Carson Observer, so that's awesome. He kind of ran through the way bills go through legislation. And We just have some questions just to kind of give residents a idea of how legislation is passed and how it goes. What happens to bills that don't make it? Are they gone forever, or could they be reintroduced? Should residents who feel strongly about certain bills still advocate? What's kind of like the lifeline of bills?
You know, my dad worked very hard on creating what's now called the Independent Redistricting Commission. And
Okay.
it took him the better part of 10 years to get to a place where that actually became a reality. Sometimes, in order to move the needle, you've got to introduce something, and it may not cross the finish line in the first year. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. And that doesn't mean that you give up under any circumstances. Oftentimes, stakeholders will want to negotiate or want to, put their 2 cents in, or oftentimes it takes a lot more time to get the requisite data and information and to measure the things necessary in order for it to, for other legislators to have the confidence to vote for it.
Yeah.
I have bills that have become 2-year bills in this cycle alone. So, one of them we kind of heard back from the governor's office, and the governor said, we really would like for you to make this a 2-year bill. In other words, we don't feel like it's baked enough, and we don't want to veto the bill, but we want it marinated a little bit more. We want to get more community input, or we want to get more input from the state and from stakeholders. And we want to consider other factors that may not have been considered. So that is very, very common in the legislative process. And oftentimes, Kristin, a bill can actually fail or not get enough votes and be brought back again the next year, maybe in a little bit of a different form, right?
Yeah.
So that is also a common thing. And, I really think California, the culture of policymaking in California is very unique.
Tell me more.
Well, you know, people are focused on results.
Hmm.
And, they're not necessarily focused on, getting their name out there, trying to take credit for issues and things that you see a lot at the national level, trying to be on news shows. We're really, I find that the legislators that I'm working with, that I'm learning from, by the way, a tremendous amount from, are really focused on the results. And so, you know, if it makes more sense to collaborate with others from across the state, if it makes more sense to reach across the aisle if necessary, people are willing to do that as long as it gets the results that they need. There are bills that are statewide issues. There are bills where California is going to take the lead and leading the rest of the nation. And there are district bills, bills that have to do with our communities, where we need certain legislation passed because it impacts the people in our communities more than others, right? Senator Gonzalez had a bill in this cycle that I was co-author of that had to do with fence line monitoring of air quality around refineries. Now, that impacts Carson. And I'm
Tremendously.
very proud to be a co-author of that bill, and that is a bill that ultimately became a 2-year bill because there were some of the issues technologically that have to do with some of the fence line monitoring equipment and how it's positioned and so forth that needed to be baked a little bit more. And the senator agreed and consulted with me and consulted with our colleagues in the legislature to make it a 2-year bill as opposed to not getting enough votes in the first year, right?
Yeah.
So, very excited to continue to work on that bill in the next legislative session and getting results.
Tell me a little bit more about baking. What does that look like?
What does that look like? Well, let's talk about, key stakeholders. So on the roofing, I actually had 2 bills on roofing. One of them was to require bars to have these test devices available so that if any consumer says, hey, can I have a test coaster where I can drop a drip of my drink on there and see if it's, can you have those for me? Well, that one was very easy to get the input of the California Restaurant Association and others, law enforcement and others on that topic. But I had another bill that would require those very same devices to be available on college campuses, right? Well, the administration of the Cal State system, the UC system, community colleges thought it was an amazing idea. But they asked, well, who's going to pay for this? Who's got the excess budget? I don't want to take away from classroom activities. I don't want to cut down on any of the course offerings that we have or the athletics or otherwise. So we need to come up with a proper funding mechanism. And that was a valid concern.
Yeah.
They want to work on the bill. They want to get it done. We need to work together on, getting the funding so that's available. So at Dominguez Hills, Cal State Long Beach, at our community colleges, those are available to young people who want to feel safer about going out and are afraid of sexual assault in those environments. Well, we needed a little more time to be able to do that, to identify the proper funding mechanism, or for me to go in through the budgetary cycle and, really fight for that. And that's precisely what's happening. So that's an example of why a bill can become a 2-year bill.
Thank you. As we kind of come to the end of our interview, tell me a bit more about any upcoming events or news that you think Carson residents should be aware about.
We've been doing things in Carson, and the families are coming out. We did a car seat check, as a matter of fact, a catalytic converter etching in partner with the Carson station, and that was very exciting. And we're going to continue to do more events like that. We have mobile district office hours where everything my team can do for you. At our office, we're going to come to the Carson Community Center, so the Carson Community Center, and do those there. And we're partnering with the mayor's office to provide meals for family in this holiday season. That's really cool. That's going to be on November 19th. So it's Thanksgiving meals. And the best way to stay up to date on all of these things is to follow me on social media. So at ASM Lowenthal on Instagram, or ASM Josh Lowenthal on Facebook and Twitter. You can also go to our website and get that information as well. But, that's the best way to stay up to date on everything.
Awesome. Well, residents, you hear it. We'll be passing out some food on November 19th. And remind me one more time about the tour happening at the port.
Oh, the tour happening from the port is if you we're going to be making an announcement about that, but we're doing a harbor tour at the port. Happy to include all of the residents of Carson that are wanting to go. Please contact my office and we'll get you set for that.
Awesome.
That's a harbor tour on a boat, by the way, where you really get to view actually the guts of the port of Long Beach, and you can see LA as well. And that's, listen, this is such a massive, massive economic driver, but our community does benefit from it. It also bears a lot of the costs. And so it's good for us to understand it and really see what's going on.
Very interesting. That I did not know. Well, thank you so much for your time, Assembly Member. You are so knowledgeable and have such great energy, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and hopefully we see you soon.
Kristin, it is a pleasure, and I would love to come back anytime. And I also love to do this in the flesh.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.